These guys here have reproduced musical scales based on the way DNA is formulated from its basic components. So they can show musical scales. And the only reason that you would be able to do that is if they were based on these acoustical principles of musical scales to begin with, which is what we're trying to prove today. Now, good vibrations give plants excitation. Eccentric gardeners who sing to their plants may not be altogether mad, says Joel Sternheimer, a French physicist and musician. And in my book, I quote Joel Sternheimer and his work, and I explain his work in my book. Sternheimer writes melodies that allegedly help plants grow and has recently applied for an international patent covering his method of music making. And this is what we said at the outset. If everything comes down to these acoustical principles, then we should be able to manipulate the growth and the growth patterns of terrestrial systems based on musical scales. Now, and this is what the work of Joel Sternheimer has shown. The tunes are not random melodies. He chooses each note to correspond to an amino acid in a protein, and the full tune corresponds to an entire protein, just like we said, a musical scale. Now, Sternheimer claims that when plants hear the appropriate tune, they produce more of that protein. Now, plants don't have ears. Plants can't hear vibration. They don't have any way to understand what they're listening to, but they can vibrate in unison with the motion of the sound wave. And this is what's going on. This is how they hear. This is how you hear. But I won't get into that. That's pretty complicated, so I won't get into that. But literally, you vibrate along with the sound wave. It moves through you, it vibrates you, and this is what's happening in plant life. And they can manipulate the growth of plants based on these sound waves. He claims to be able, using simple physics, to translate into audible vibrations of music the quantum vibrations that occur at the molecular level as a protein is being assembled from its constituent amino acids. Each musical note is a multiple of original frequencies, That's what I was showing you here. Each musical note is a multiple of original frequencies. This is going to become very important later on in mathematics. Now, there's multiple frequencies that occur when amino acids join the protein chain. Explains Sternheimer. Playing the tune stimulates synthesis of this protein. So literally, this offers a future for medicine because this stimulates the synthesis of the proteins that people need. So you don't have to use stem cells anymore. All you have to do is use music, and it will stimulate the cells to produce specific proteins that will combine in the genes to form that which is needed to regrow tissue, regrow plants, everything else, destroy cancer, all these kind of things. And this research is going on all the time. Now, if everything wasn't based on acoustics at its foundation, none of this would be possible. If it was all just random jiggling going on, there would be complete noise, complete static. You would never be able to predict any of this happening. You would never be able to reproduce any of these results. There would be no harmony, according to Darwinian evolution. Now, do cells... All right. You have to listen very, very closely, but yes, cells produce a symphony of sounds. And this is one of the criteria of acoustical genesis theory. Researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles studied Baker's yeast cells, discovered that the cell walls vibrate 1,000 times per second. These motions are too slight and fast to be caught on video, but when converted into sound, they create what the scientists describe as a high-pitched scream. It's about the same frequency as 2 octaves above middle C on a piano, but not loud enough to hear with the naked ear. The difference between a healthy cell and a cancer cell is like listening to 2 very large orchestras playing their instruments all at the same time, Gardner says. But in the cancerous orchestra, the tuba is horribly out of tune. And that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you today. If everything was not according to this predetermined scale and based on the foundation of acoustics and as spoken, as written in Genesis, as being spoken into existence, then everything would be out of tune with everything else. If it was based on Darwinian principles and the gradual growth of organisms from single cell to humans, there would be no harmony. It would all be noise. There would be nothing pleasing to the eye and nothing pleasing to the ear. Okay. Now, Luther Sutherland. Geology and paleontology held great expectations for Charles Darwin, although in 1859 he admitted that they presented the strongest single evidence against his theory, geology and paleontology. Fossils were a perplexing puzzlement to him because they did not reveal any evidence of a gradual and continuous evolution of the life from a common ancestor, proof he needed to support his theory. Although fossils were an enigma to Darwin, he ignored the problem and found comfort in the faith that future explorations would reverse the situation and ultimately prove his theory correct. The reason for abrupt appearances and gaps can no longer be attributed to the imperfection of the fossil record as it was by Darwin when paleontology was a young science. That was in 1954, almost 100 years after Darwin's theory was presented. So he was hoping for somewhere in the future that paleontology would confirm his theory, but it did not. Now, back to Luther's Sutherland. Now, after over 120 years of the most extensive and painstaking geological exploration of every continent and ocean bottom, the picture is infinitely more vivid and complete than it was in 1859. Formations have been discovered containing hundreds of billions of fossils, and our museums now are filled with over 100 million fossils of 250,000 different species. The availability of this profusion of hard scientific data should permit objective investigators to determine if Darwin was on the right track. And what do we find? It is not even possible to make a caricature of evolution out of paleobiological facts. The fossil material is now so complete that the lack of transitional series cannot be explained as due to the scarcity of the material as it always has been. The deficiencies are real. They will never be filled. That was in 1953. And since 1953, even though we have more and more and more than that of those 120,000 and billions of fossils, it still has not been filled in. There is no need to apologize any longer for the poverty of the fossil record. In some ways, it has become almost unmanageably rich, and discovery is outpacing integration. The fossil record nevertheless continues to be composed mainly of gaps. This is something they cannot explain, but I have explained to you today why this is. Now, information. Okay, if all of information comes down to your DNA, if you come down to DNA, and DNA is nothing but acoustic, based on acoustic principles, and we can make DNA by simply playing Joel Sternheimer's musical compositions, and it forms proteins to create DNA, then everything is nothing but information as spoken into existence in the beginning by an unimaginably intelligent creator.